So today we have a true staple of the New York jazz scene, Spike Wilner, a pianist, bandleader, and longtime presence as the owner of Smalls Jazz Club in Mezzrow. And from steady gigs at legendary places like the Village Gate to his ongoing performances of today, he's lived and breathed the jazz life in its purest form. And we are live. So Spike, good to see you.
Thanks, Abe. Good to see you too.
Um, Spike, the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was how the ticket sales system kind of changed. I mean, everyone kind of knew Smalls as being a place you could pay at the door, that sort of thing. But I love now, because in a world with so much uncertainty, it gives people, people are, a little more anxious than they used to be. Now, you can go buy a ticket online for one of the shows at either of the clubs. I mean, it's certainly changed that way. Has that been, something that's been really helpful for you? Has it changed the way, the logistics go? So kind of talk to me about how that started.
Well, I guess you're referring to there was a long time business practice at Smalls to collect a cover charge at the door, usually in cash. Although we did innovate and get a credit card reader at one point to take cards at the door. But this was pre-COVID, so we were operating on a largely cash basis or significant amount of cash in the revenue. Um, when I opened Mezzrow in 2011, the guy that designed my website had built into it a ticket thing, ticket processing part of the software. I didn't think much of it, but we tried it at Mezzrow first because Mezzrow was much more reservation oriented, where Smalls was always traditionally, pay at the door and go in and crowd in. Um, the thing is that COVID changed everything because once we were shut down for a long period of time, the neighborhood and the fire department and a lot of these agencies became very, very aggressive about lines and management of your crowd in front of your club. There's two businesses on either side of us that also have outdoor seating. So it became imperative for us to change our operation somehow. And the online ticketing thing kind of solved the problem. We just basically kept it at our, there's a capacity that we're allowed and we sell a certain amount. That's way, like you said, people can go on our website and just simply have a ticket. That way they're seated. But we also have walk-in availability depending on the night. And it changes also. We have no cover charge in the afternoons, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We have no cover charge from midnight on during the week as well for those bands. So really, it's just these ticketed shows that we found it's very useful to know exactly how many seats we're selling, and that way people don't have to worry about whether they'll get a seat or not, that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
as someone who loves to, plan things out, I think it's a great thing to know, like, oh, like I'm gonna definitely have a seat available and stuff because, we want to see these shows and know we're gonna be comfortable. And you're also a pianist, which, you navigate the world of owning these two clubs, all the logistical components of it, but
Hmm.
you're also an artist
Hmm.
and you spread out the work to such a wide range of people and navigate that world. Talk to me a little bit about it's got to be a balancing act, because I know I'm a business owner also and player.
Hmm.
So, kind of talk to me about balancing those two worlds because you're a pianist first and foremost, right? And then you have to, run in two different businesses. So how does that work?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a father, actually. And first and foremost, I'm a human being on planet Earth with a responsibility to myself and my family and God. And, like it's easy to get caught up in this idea of how important you are as a musician because really you're not that important, I think. And jazz is a game for children to play and have fun. And when you're young and you're playing jazz together, it's a lot of fun. And well, it should be. And jazz is also profound because it's a spiritual pursuit. So it can lead to enlightenment, it can lead to epiphany, religious ones. And we've seen that in our great artists, someone like John Coltrane or somebody to that effect. And so it's a powerful medium. But as an instrument of making a living, it's really, that's for each person to decide. And I'm not really of the mindset that like touring most of the year around from club to club to club is the best lifestyle. Having done some of it, not like some of my colleagues, but I relish just sticking around. So operating the club for me has just been a kind of I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to do it, like because it allowed me to stay present in the music that I love, but also, not have to necessarily rely on earning a living by playing gigs all the time or teaching. And, my commitment to practicing jazz piano has always been 100% since I was a little kid, and it never will stop. And whether I become famous from it or rich from it is not really, it's irrelevant. It's a spiritual pursuit for me. Now, I believe firmly that if you uh, address your art as a jazz musician, as a musician, you address your instrument, you address your music daily through disciplined practice work and honest practice work, that you will invariably grow. There's nothing more powerful than the daily application of your mind to a task in a routine way. That's the most powerful tool we have as human beings. What musicians know, most people don't know, which is that you can practice every day and get better. Athletes kind of know that. Most people have no idea. But you know what's really cool about the idea of practice in the sense of being a jazz musician is that same principle can apply to your spiritual self. And you can practice spiritualism through the same means you would practice learning a bird solo through repetition and concentration. And it's a very profound tool. So, to answer your question, if you're a Mason, then they say 1/3 of your life to your family, 1/3 of your life to your business, 1/3 of your life to God, right? So that's their, and that can be the case where you give a third to your family, or if not more, should be more, and to your business, and then also to your art or God, whatever, like spiritual pursuit. There's always room in your life for it. I think what pollutes our day and age is that everyone's trying to commercialize art so that they can earn money from it or fame. And I think it's just really a horrendous mistake because it leads to just, I think dying in poverty as an artist is not a great thing.
Oh,
I
certainly not. I mean, it's that's the thing too. I mean, that's almost a romanticized idea, but you're talking about having a family and staying grounded in that way, is what it's really, that takes the precedent.
Well, I've known a lot of artists, great ones in my day. Many have now passed away. A lot of the greatest artists that I know were completely ungrounded and lived life in a way that was vicarious and like they would just go balls to the wall or not give a shit about any ramifications of anything in their lives as long as they could pursue their craft until they died. And I can think of artists that are, especially in the last few years that I've lost. There were friends of mine like that. Then I'm too much of a coward in a way to live my art that way. And in a way, it's kind of a selfish way to live. I always just like becoming a dad later in life has opened my eyes to the idea of living a life for someone else rather than for yourself. And it also lends a freshness to art. Like if you have to play music, I want to free my music from commercial use. I don't want to, it's like, do you really want to get money so you can have sex? It's like, would you want to be a erotic film star where people are paying you to have sex in public? It's kind of the same thing. The intimacy of performance is very special, especially in jazz. And to try to constantly try to make money with it, it hurts.
I
I
understand.
don't.
And then there's also the idea too of, it has to be about the art first and foremost. And, like you mentioned, like this art has a way to transform us and heal us. And I personally believe in that. And it's not even just about music, it's just about sound overall that can
Mhm.
heal us. Like being someone who's, had surgeries to like listen to certain sounds that frequency can heal us. There's something that takes over.
Mhm.
And when did you come to that awareness? Like, at least, sometimes we might get the chills when we play the instrument, but that awareness, around what age do you think that happened, do you think?
What time, when was I aware of music, its power?
The power, the transforming power that something greater is at work.
Well, I remember one distinct experience when I was very young. I think I might have been first grade or even kindergarten age. They brought a symphony to the school where I was going to school, and I was being very rowdy. I was a rowdy kid, but the symphony started to play, and I heard this sound for the first time, and it just floored me. I kind of flipped out. And actually, what ended up happening was the teacher misinterpreted it and tossed me out of the concert, and I was begging to go back in because
Oh
I
man.
couldn't. But I'll never forget that experience. The other thing is I remember when I was really like maybe 12 or 13, there was a neighborhood kid who was my friend, and he played bass, and we started playing a little bit, jamming together. And I just remember the first time ever having the experience of connecting with another person in a musical experience, and it was really like, wow, this is so great. And then I didn't really know what to do. I was always like a natural pianist, self-taught. I went to college first for computers and then dropped out of that. Then I ended up going to the new school. And the new school, I was the very first year at the new school with some very illustrious people there at the time, and became my friends for life. Like, for example, Peter Bernstein and I were there. Brad Meldau was there. He's a very good friend of mine to this day. Larry Goldings, who named me Spike, by the way. We were college roommates at that time. And just a lot of great musicians came up at that right at that moment. That band, the Blues Travelers, with John Popper was there, and the Spin Doctors with Eric Schenkman and Aaron Comas. Those guys were there. Like great rock bands, great jazz musicians, all coming out of this one program. It was like 1986. Um, what happened for me too was like I was not very, very. I mean, I was really new at playing jazz. It was only just like I had only gotten serious maybe a year or so. And when I got to the new school, uh, I had to contend with Larry Goldings, who at age 18 was like, a fully developed jazz artist that
Was it
could.
like you felt like you had to almost catch up in a sense because,
Oh yeah, I mean, it was at first just shocking and then disheartening, but then I just kind of set my nose to the grindstone. I mean, like between Brad and Larry Goldings as my college class, it was kind of tough. I mean, these guys were both geniuses, and it was just like, wow. But I learned a lot. I mean, I lived with Larry, and Brad and I, like I said, grew up together in a lot of ways, and so I learned so much. And Samuel Hell was there, for example. I learned from this guy, and there were so many great musicians together that we really learned a lot. What happened with me though was like once I graduated, especially after college was over, I was faced with just what we had discussed, making a living as a musician, which I did. And of course, in my case, I spent a lot of time playing solo piano, hotel gigs, duos in restaurants, occasionally touring with bands like Artie Shaw or, you know, uh, I once went out with Maynard Ferguson's band. Like I did a lot of big bands, but mostly my living was made in hotels and restaurants,
did you
honestly,
have to
cafes.
do any gigs like as far as playing with pop bands, like weddings or anything like that? Or was it mostly, mostly jazz? Like, would you ever get the call to oh, there's a wedding Saturday night, we're gonna do all the hits, anything like that? Or
Well, this was like 1990. At this time, there was still this network of what they called club date agencies. It was the club date scene. And these, when they said club date, they didn't mean jazz club, they meant country clubs where they would be these band leaders that would get these big contracts to bring out bands. And you would play like the best of Count Basie, the best of like, big band or like schmaltzy waltzes, like very traditional stuff that these people wanted to hear and dance to. You were doing a lot of dances. And it wasn't really pop. It's changed now to where people want to hear actual pop music at their events. But in these old days, still it was like this remnants. I mean, you put on a tuxedo. I used to wear a tuxedo. I had to own a few, and that was just the way you made a living. Uh, I remember like during this period when I hit about age 30 already, what was happening in my scene was I was present on the New York jazz scene there and playing, of course, and gigging around with great musicians, of course, just like local though for the most part. But I was also focused on studying. I was at part took place with I participated in Barry Harris's stuff and really put my mind to his concepts and kind of got around that. And then I kind of you know, just, I've always very keen to understand jazz. I spent a lot of time transcribing stuff. I went backwards in time. I started getting into Tatum and then earlier Willie the Lion Smith and James P. Johnson. I started playing a lot of stride piano. Um, the problem with the stride piano stuff is that you hit a wall stylistically. It just kind of ends up sounding dated no matter what you do. And also, like, you end up playing repertoire rather than like improvising. That's when I kind of met I met Harry Whitaker, my mentor, who was at that time playing in Arturo's, and Harry kind of opened me up to just the idea of completely spontaneously improvising and really just getting into that. And that was a very, very big moment for me where I realized that it was not really about playing anything particularly at all, but just about being there right in the moment. And simultaneously, what was happening to me at that time was a kind of a breakdown because, well, for one thing, my closest friends are like Brad Meldau and Larry Goldings and Peter Bernstein, and needless to say, Sam Yahel. And needless to say, all these guys are getting more and more famous at this time, very famous, and doing amazing things and going around doing things, and you can't help but put yourself in a place of comparison. And that became a ego crunch for me and turned me into a kind of an angry person, spiteful person, because
I
I,
understand what you're saying because like I grew up, big, what are they, small, whatever, fish in a big bowl, that sort of thing. And then I went to Berkeley and it was just like, whoa, you know what I mean? So it's, this is just something this happens naturally, happens
well,
to,
well, at the time, it was a test for me, spiritual test, because what happened for me was that I was getting so angry and bitter. I had ruined a relationship with a woman at the time, and she had left me, and it finally dawned on me that I had to change my attitude towards the music, or I would end up quitting because it meant too much, especially with the ego. And
the
I,
way you spoke in the beginning too, when you were talking about how we're so attached to ourselves as artists. A big thing I've been thinking about, and these things take time, like the word that came to my mind was detachment. Do we have to detach from everything to play? Do you think like, and almost like we need to observe ourselves. We have to let go of control. Is that what needs to happen, you think?
you know what? You have to confront the fact that there's no self whatsoever, and you got to stop thinking about it. And just the thing what's so nice about jazz is that if it's done correctly, then it's an automatic process that has nothing to do with you or your thoughts or your memories or anything. It just has to do with your reactions that are operating in a level far beyond what you normally do. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is, what is that? Like, if you have something that in you can take over and do something so quickly and efficiently, then you have to question what quote unquote you are and get to the essence of it all.
Well,
Now, if you can get to that, then you really have something to say. The thing is, it's like that's the Godhead. That's the non-self. That's the Godhead. That's why jazz is a Zen art, because we can achieve Zen with jazz. People understand that if they play. What keeps us away from the Zen of jazz is charts and
oh, and the
preparation
war, yeah,
and writing
magazines and
tunes
rankings.
and yeah, not to mention the like I can say for myself that when I was at the new school, I thought it was super important to be able to comp like Herbie Hancock or comp like McCoy Tyner or take a solo like Chick Corea or play like Bud Powell or play like this. And you ended up like having sessions where you say, let's do this tune from Blue Note Records, such and such, and do this exact arrangement. And there's an educational component that's great, like for sure interesting to check out how Horace Silver composed, to check out. But I think the end of the day, you have to let it all go. If you really want to play the essence of this music, which is to me the Godhead, get to the spontaneity. And that's why I learned from like a guy like Harry Whitaker, like it's like, why did Harry Whitaker play Night in Tunisia every night? Did he really like Night in Tunisia? Is that really like he's tribute to Dizzy? Does he care about Dizzy Gillespie? No, it has nothing to do with Dizzy Gillespie. It doesn't have anything to do with anything except that the changes, the form and changes are so deeply, deeply, deeply ingrained that the whole universe becomes open to him and all the musicians that can go in that world. The only other way around is to go completely free, and there's not many people that can really do that. That's very hard to do, much even though people don't understand that. I had the experience one time playing with Ornette Coleman a couple of times where we played free for hours at a time. And I finally understood his genius by just experiencing him, which was to understand how he could create a world for musicians to participate in together in this free world. And I understood that no one else can do that. It's very, very rare. But we need these tunes as frameworks so that we can communicate together. There's very hard to not have a framework in jazz, or else you really can, but like if you're looking at a chart where everyone's got these hits written out, and you got to play these specific voicings at this time, and you got these odd bars, or you're playing this weird time, that's going to take you away from being spontaneous, and that's going to take away from the real. I mean, remember the real cornerstone of jazz is blues, and when I mean blues, I mean 12-bar form blues, which is like 4/4/4, and the ingrainedness of what that means, 1/4, 5/1. Like that's the shit. It's the fundamental. Like in Zen Buddhism, they teach you mu, and you have to do that forever. And you think, well, I'll master mu. You never master mu. It's just like the blues. It gets more and more profound as you practice it, but you can't master it. You can't master anything really. So it's
Have
just like,
Have you ever read the work of Thich Nhat Hanh? Because you mentioned this, Zen. You know what I'm talking about?
I do, yeah, sure, of course.
He says the fact that you are alive, anything is possible. And I see a direct correlation to the music personally because we see the infinite possibilities. Um, it's I've always felt that like this is a representation, this music is a representation of the universe, what's possible. Do you ever think about, in that way at least, like they run
Well,
parallel?
to me, it's like universe. I don't know what that can be. The one thing is true is that like, like you and I are at least there's a reality where we live in where we eat and we sleep and we nourish a body, right? And our physical actions have effect. We know that there's cause and effect. What's cool about jazz is it allows us to exist for at least a moment in a completely limitless world where you're only bound by sound. Like there's no form whatsoever. You don't have to even deal with forms. So you can be in this world of sound where my sound and your sound can mix. And what happens when my sound and your sound mix? Is it going to be great? Is it going to be awful? Could be either. You find the right guys where you put your sound with their sound, and then you make something that's like transcendent of one man. It's four or five, and then that's powerful. That makes me think like in the old days, like if you could put instead of having 30,000 people in a concert for, what's her name? That shit singer. You know who I'm talking about. I can't even remember her name. But imagine if we could get everybody in a stadium together with the same kind of mindset, the way a jazz quartet could play in some form that we could all follow together over and over again to achieve a massive sound of human spirit. Like that's who knows what could get done in that way. Build the pyramids. It's like it could be. We don't understand yet how math. That's why they want to keep us distracted. They're afraid that if we unify on that level, it could really become a world changing.
And
But
the other side to it is the arts, or it's like I actually just I found out like the college I teach at that they're
Mhm.
cutting the arts department in 2 years.
Right.
And it's just, I don't know what the hell's happening in terms on that level. Something is going on, like the University of the Arts closed.
Well,
Um,
the truth of the matter is that again, like art is not a business,
I know
and
that's
trying
why,
to make a business of art is polluting it. And so, if it has to fail and crumble, then so be it.
it's
Like
what
if
it is.
universities are the only things that are preserving an art, then the art just shouldn't be around. You know what an art is? Is like when a man picks up a guitar at the end of the day and plays a song for himself so that he feels solace. That can be art. And then like another thing is like if a woman can pick up an instrument and every day develop a theme. And then like if people want to get together and have this musical game where like, hey, this song? I know the song too. Let's play it together. No, let's just see what happens and play it together. Great. Oh, that was fun. Cool. Let's try this. Like that's music game,
Mhm.
you know? If
Hmm.
you have two wizards together playing music game or three music wizards, then you're going to have some serious magic, you know?
Yeah. So if I mean it's out of our if the universities crumble, so be it. But no, nonetheless, I was just talking to Mike Boone about this yesterday.
Mhm.
The one of the big problems with the whole university system in terms of learning jazz is that you might have like if you get a degree in jazz performance, you might have to perform for people maybe 2 or 3 times in 4 years. And when you leave, good luck because once you're in front of people playing music and really creating, like this has nothing to do with what you learn whatsoever. So I think I'm kind of like whatever happens happens in that way because they just have it backwards when it comes to being in
Well,
front of people.
academics is, say what you want, that's a whole other conversation, honestly, of like uh the value of academics. Jazz itself is not a college subject.
That's what I'm yeah, I understand.
It's not meant to be.
Yeah.
And I think that the current musical education system is really kind of is just not correct.
Oh, I
You know,
agree
like,
with you.
like Juilliard or the New School or these places. I don't understand why there has to be a division between classical and jazz as in two different schools. I think that like every person who's endeavoring to get a degree in music performance should have to play classical music and jazz together. And the skills that you get from classical reading and the strictness of that, and the skills you get from jazz playing, which is the ear training and the connection to your instrument, will only benefit both. And to divide it is complete idiocy and short-sightedness.
Yeah. I mean, it is completely backwards in that sense. Someone was asking me, should I go to jazz school? And I told them, don't go to jazz school. Because I found out what Grant Stewart was doing with his program. I was like, you can do a program like that, get some private lessons, and just go play with as many people as humanly possible, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah, the whole purpose of school, jazz school, is to put yourself in a community of like-minded artists so that
True.
you can learn and grow together,
Hmm.
hopefully with good guidance. Like when I was at the new school, I certainly had exactly that, like great, incredible teachers and a wonderful group of young musicians who became my lifelong friends. So that was a great benefit. And then later in life, right before I became the owner of Smalls, I went back to college at the State University of New York in Purchase under Todd Kuhlman at that time to finish my Master's of Fine Arts, which I did. And that was also a great experience. I was 40 years old at that time in my life going back to graduate school. And that was also a humbling experience, but a good one for me. And, you know, I published a book at that time, thanks to Todd and Pete Malverne. And then I bought Smalls, and then my life completely changed
Yeah.
right
We
at
have,
that
yeah,
time.
your life, you say it like, my life completely changed, because we don't know where our life is going to go. I had mentioned before, I'd said, use the word surgery that I had because I wanted to talk to you. We spoke briefly about it, if it was okay. After I had a surgery, I couldn't play guitar for about 2 months. And the first
Mhm.
gig I did after my surgery was getting the chance to play with Anthony Pinciotti. It was almost
Mhm.
like the going back after not playing for so long, it was like it made that performance even more special during the recovery. And you were his close friend, and he was part of your trio. And I'm terribly sorry, for your loss and everything. But
Mhm.
the jazz world lost such a tremendous player. You gave this beautiful. I saw it online. There was at the church when that whole honoring him. Um, if you could convey to the listener, talk a little bit about him, what playing with him meant to you, your relationship personally, because and people don't understand like the level of musician he was.
Well, Anthony was a special guy. Uh, he was kind of like I met him years and years ago when we were kids, and he was like exactly the same as he was probably the day he died, just dressed the same and same look and everything. And we started playing together then, and I can't even remember what year at this time. It was a long time ago. I had already become the. I've gotten involved with Smalls. I bought
You were already
Smalls
you
in
were already the owner. Mhm.
2007.
Okay.
So My first real trio with Anthony was probably around 2007, 2008, right when I became in there. And that led to a trio that I called the Ancient Aliens, and that was with Tyler Mitchell and Anthony Pinciotti and myself. And that trio, we did a lot of touring and recording together over a long period of time. I can't say how many years, but I don't remember, but it was for a good amount of time, well into COVID and past. And then eventually, I had to change the trio, and I had Paul Gill come in, who was also an old friend, and that became a trio that I called Contrafactus. And that trio did a lot of work together for years and touring, went to Europe, recording different guest artists and stuff. And that led up to just like our most recent project, which is just about to come out on Cellar Live in April, called uh, it's called the Children and the Warlock, and it's actually a tribute to Harry Whitaker.
Mhm. So
And
that
that's coming out, and that's going to be Anthony's last recording before he passed with Paul Gill, Trio Contrafactus, and also George Garzone, the guest artist on that. And George is an unbelievable, and the record is really powerful. For me, it was like a great moment in my artistic career, but also tragic in that all the plans post record got scuttled because Anthony went to heaven. It was a shocking departure. And, he was the kind of guy that every musician in town loved him. He was a consummate artist, drummer, could play every show perfectly with intuitive passion, without any showboating or any excess of anything. He was never complaining. You go on the road with him, and he loved to hang. He loved the hang, like just the cats and going to the bar and seeing the cats. Uh, and it's hard to ask. He was just such a ubiquitous presence around town, playing gigs all over the place with people that just adored him. And he was a great artist. There's no way around it. He was a really deep improvising musician that was also extremely intuitive, and when you played together, you had this kind of hookup that was really quite remarkable. And actually, Samuel Held mentioned something that I completely agree with. He said that Anthony would give you the confidence to be yourself. And I think that is so true. Like, I grew so much as a human being and as an artist through Anthony Pinciotti because he gave me the confidence to pursue Spike Wilner, like, because, sometimes you're your worst enemy. And we talk about the development as an artist, and what it takes to get through to a certain point where you finally find artistic self-realization or a beginning to have confidence or something.
Yeah, I
But you
was
need,
uh, I was a little nervous when I was going to play with him for the first time because I knew he was so tremendous and everything. But just by the person, just meeting him, there was none of that whatsoever. It was like I could just play and just I didn't have to. It was like, oh, what am I even worried about this for? This is such a gentle soul and is here for the right reasons.
Mhm.
So it's
Cool.
we
Yeah,
can
yeah, it's a
relate to that.
tragic loss. I mean, now it's like kind of just time marches on. People are playing, the scene's on. For me, it's been an interesting period of trying different drummers out to see how it feels. And there's so many great musicians in New York that you can call. They're all great. Every drummer I've played with now is just off the chain. I did have a chance to play with Lewis Nash recently, a recording with Jesse Davis's quartet. And man, I have to say that was a transcendent experience to just play with a drummer like him. He was really just wonderful, wonderful musician. And who else have I played with recently on drums that I love? Well, Eric McPherson and I have been playing more. I played recently with Justin Faulkner too in
Oh,
Philadelphia, and he's great. We had such a good night. I want to
he's
play more with
dangerous,
him.
dangerous
And
drummer.
also Chris Beck,
Hmm.
who's I think very underrated drummer, but plays so wonderfully and swinging, tasty. So yeah, there's a lot of guys available, and that's just a handful of guys that are, there's I could name dozens more, but those are just guys I've recently played with. But it's interesting to just try to see. It's put me in a certain place musically where I just don't really know quite exactly what I'm trying to do yet.
Was that when you played the trio with him, is that the apex of you being as free as possible on the instrument?
Well,
I mean, you go when the best is yet to
I
come,
think
in life, but
I
I'm just saying,
I
like, did
think
it ever feel
I
like that?
I don't know. I'm not going to say that's the apex. It's interesting is since he died, um, I've been able to, first of all, I've recently been able to put together my own personal studio, so I have a place to practice like at night and during the day, and it's kind of a nice, and it's put me in a practicing mode where I can make practicing part of my daily routine, regardless of what's happening. And a after Anthony died, I started really practicing some different things I wanted to try, and getting playing classical like I do, and I feel great at the piano. I mean, I feel better than ever now. I wish Anthony was alive now so we could get down because it feels great. Like I feel better than ever now, but he's dead. So that's it. So it's cool. And one day I guess, that's true for all of us, but it's a damn shame.
Yeah,
I think,
we're all gonna not be here one day, and this is, I mean, I don't think people, I think people just run from that personally, the discomfort of thinking about that. But I think in order to be free, we have to embrace the uncertainty. You have to, and embrace that fact.
well,
Uh,
I do think that when it's time to act, you have to give your all, like, and that is pretty much every moment. But as a jazz musician, when it's time to play, you really, really play because you never know. Like, I mean, Anthony, that was his last record for the most part, I'd say. I don't know if there's something else, but as far as I'm concerned, that's his last record with me. And man, he's so great on it. It's just like he's playing his ass off every single second on there. And that's how he was. He was flouting death. He was the kind of guy that didn't give a shit about it. And he didn't live very healthily, I have to say. I'm not going to say specifically, but I felt like he was not living a healthy life as a human being. And I'm sad that he died. It's terrible. I think there's nothing you can say or do at this point. But he just lived right in the moment as hard as possible. That's
yeah.
what I can say. He was a true artist.
What I was going to ask you, I'm very, when there's nothing like Smalls. It's like an amazing place. It's just cool. There's just nothing like you can't really compare it to anything. Mezzrow is when visually and just the room very, very different. Did you want to create something that was very different in that sense? Like, was this a thought, or how did you think about designing it and everything? Like, was that a thought basically is what I'm asking? Like, we need to do something almost very different visually?
Um, originally at the time that Mezzrow was coming around, there was a time at Smalls where we'd have these lines around the corner every night. At those days, Mitch would let the lines just go crazy around the corner, and it was so crowded. We began to think about a way to take the people that were in line and find another place to put them, like a holding pen kind of thing. And that basement across the street became available, and I thought about it. I went and had a tour, and I thought it would really be viable. And what I did at that time was I made a deal with a landlord who was very amenable, and it was like I took a short agreement on it, like a 3-month lease, basically, agreeing that if I could get a liquor license, that I would take a 10-year lease, but otherwise I would just pay him like a certain amount of rent. And you know, uh, he agreed to that, and then I went to work on getting a liquor license for the space, which was quite a challenge, but there was a lot of support for it, and I ended up getting it passed. Got the liquor license, signed the lease, and then the next thing was like the idea would be, well, at least originally for Mezzrow, what I thought would be that it was just a bar where people could come in and drink, and there was some guy in the corner playing piano, and no one was really listening. Like I was really originally just like a piano bar kind of vibe, like I was used to in the old days.
That was the
And
original thought. Yeah. Okay.
that was the original thought. No cover charge. You just come in, drink, hang out here, and then you go over to your show at Smalls. That was the original idea. And I remember I hired Ahuda Sherry to come in and play for the first few weeks at Mezzrow. And I don't know if the layout of Mezzrow is kind of special because you have this front room that's like this ball and then this long kind of tube and then it opens to a bar. So the front part where the music is quite acoustically remarkable.
Yeah.
And what was
I'll be
happening
there
was like,
next week. I bought tickets to go hear Neil Miner and his trio, so I'll be there next week. I like to sit in that way. It's good, the great
yeah, it's
acoustics.
fantastic. The sound is amazing. It's acoustic heaven in there. But what happened was like Ehud would play and everyone would just be sitting around listening to him like it was a concert instead of just drinking and talking. And I'd come in and see that and I'd be like, wait a minute, what the hell's going on here? Like people are listening? Like why? And I realized that the sound was so profound and the piano sounded fantastic. So that's when we started to just you know, think about an actual venue working as operating as a venue on its own right with people coming from small city. The design of the bar itself, the look that you're asking about, I kind of copied Bradley's, really. I just like what I liked was the darkness at Bradley's. If you remember, I don't know if you're ever in the old Bradley's, but it was just like a real mahogany bar with like a big old mahogany front bar and back bar, old, like a brass rail at the floor. And I just always had that kind of old New York bar idea in my mind. And I went to Philadelphia to this kind of reclaiming guy and bought the back bar at Mezzrow is actually an antique. It's like 1920s. And then the front bar, with the actual place where people sit, is just a rebuild. And then regular tables and chairs for the most part. But that was the idea. But what's happened with Mezzrow now is it's kind of become its own thing altogether. So it's really just almost an independent. For a long time, it was like dependent on Smalls for its own subsistence, but now it's really quite independent. Has been for a while.
And owning a music venue is, it's its own challenge for a number of reasons. Um, but there's so much support too from artists and that when people, musicians who want to play and the audiences who want to hear it. Has it become more stressful owning two businesses? Are you able to kind of almost combine them into one thing in a sense that say, oh, one just grew? But like, talk to me a little bit about that because I would imagine your world 100% changes when you own two venues. So what about the stress with that?
Um, well, truth be told, you said it correctly. Like Mezzrow and Smalls essentially run in tandem. It's like the same suppliers, the same staff. I use one payroll for both clubs, kind of thing. And Jeff, who's my GM right now, oversees both. So really, like all my staff members right now, especially this current incarnation of my small staff, is really like a very capable group of people who can easily work on either side of the street without any
Yeah,
problems.
and they're
So,
right across the street, just across Seventh Avenue.
so in a lot of ways, one club is an extension of another. There's really no doubt about it, and it always has been that. So, as far as extra stress, there's really not that much extra stress. Like the most stressful experience I've ever been through was COVID, like having the shutdown
I
and
know
having to try to
they were coming.
survive.
They were trying to shut down the number of people, that sort of thing with you guys.
Well, I mean, we were actually physically out of business for almost 2 years, and
Right.
then once they finally started letting people in, it was very limited for a long time.
Yeah.
We're coming up on 5 years actually, right? March of 2020 was
Right. Five.
COVID done. March 18th, 20th, or something like that. It's
Were
coming up.
you were you nervous about that these clubs would no longer exist during the pandemic where you're like, I'm gonna find a way no
Absolutely.
matter what?
No, it's a miracle they survived at all. I mean, Mezzrow was just mothballed. Smalls, I mean, the main problem with COVID was that, well, there's a lot of problems with it, but like as far as New York City businesses was concerned, there was no alleviation on rent or expenses on a monthly basis, yet we were not allowed to operate.
It made no sense.
So there was no way you either died or you didn't die. And if you didn't die, you had to figure out a way to come up with enough money to keep yourself. So, I mean, some people didn't pay rent and they weren't really enforcing but it created a world of legal problems post COVID. What happened with us was just quite simply a miracle was that we decided to start using our live stream, which we always had. And I hired one band a day to come to the club. No one was there. The place was closed. And we'd do one live stream concert per day and ask people to give donations. And it became very, very big. Like people worldwide watched it. And what happened is we started getting an outpouring of revenue. I had a not for profit that I had created primarily as a tool for keeping my archive alive. But at that time, at COVID, it became critical for fundraising for the way it allowed people to just give money to Smalls, which we used then for things like keeping a shoestring staff, like for example, Jeff and Andrew Kushner and Panayiotis, those guys stood hard. Carlos Abadi through that period. They came through in the clutch during a time when it was extremely challenging, and I kept them on payroll through that. And then, you know, paying some rent, paying a band every day. Like we just try to keep alive, trying to keep our name alive. And it
Well, because
really,
many clubs closed during the pandemic, like just
not
closed
just
their
clubs. I
doors.
mean, stores, restaurants,
Yeah,
bookstores, cafes, little shops, anything that was like a mom and pop store was gone. Everything got boarded up. It was just a disaster. Yet you were still expected to pay your, $10,000 a month rent or whatever it was. Now, I mean, like I said, we just paid our rent through the grace of God because we got people that gave us money. And
I
in
understand.
fact,
No,
by
my
the time
studio that I rent where I'm recording, like they didn't want to do anything. They're just like, oh no, you have to pay your rent. Yeah, that's it. No, you got to pay
that's
your
how it
rent.
was in New York. It was an absurd, if not intentional. I don't know what their purpose was, and I don't dare speculate. And again, that gets into our realm. What I said earlier, I don't want
Yeah,
to
no
talk
problem. We don't
politics.
have to go into that.
But
Yeah.
it was just a very challenging time. Coming out of it after it's over, finally, once all the weirdness with the testing and the masks, and finally over. Now it's back to its vibrant self. And what's happening now for us is we're realizing that early sets are really popular. So like we started on the weekend at Smalls, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a 6 p.m. show. Actually, we have also our 2 p.m. jam sessions, which are very popular. But I think we're going to adopt a 6 o'clock start time across the board at both clubs, probably by May. Mezzrow just started, and I'm going to make the same thing at Smalls, where the doors will be 5:30 and our first set's 6 o'clock.
Well, that's the thing too. It's like more artists can perform. It's like there are certain clubs where it's just two sets. They'll keep the same band, and like you have, and that's the thing. Like those sets are usually either 8 or 10 o'clock or 7 and 9, but you're going all through from 6 o'clock all the way until after
Just
midnight.
started
Yeah.
six, but well, we used to try to do 7:39, 10:30, and 12. But what we found out was that the 12 o'clock set, except for say Saturday nights, no one was buying a 12 o'clock ticket anymore. Like those days are gone. Like the old days, that would be no problem. And now no one's going out at midnight. So we tried to flip it on the other side. We did 6 o'clock and 7:30.
I bought a ticket for a midnight set
Nine.
last week, but I like to buy tickets. I like to know that I'll have a seat, you know.
uh,
But I think